ladies and gentlemen, Brian.
All right, so yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Andy, for putting this together. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. I just think it's incredible, this whole community that you've really been fostering here. And it really seems like a fantastic event, and I'm excited to meet you all. I'll be hanging around here, all day. So yeah, excited to get into it. So I guess I'm here, invited as like the AI guy. And I mean, but really, it's 2026 now. Maybe we're all AI people. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. A couple weeks ago, actually around the time I was putting together these slides, I had the chance to play with the new Claude Fable model for the 3 days that it was available, and until my silly government pulled it back. Since then I had to switch back to Opus, and the back and forth it made me think. Actually the model that I'm using doesn't really matter all that much. And then in the past month I started switching around the harnesses that I'm using in my work from Claude Code, and then I switched over to Codex for a little while, then back to Cursor, and then back to Claude Code, and then I realized again, it really doesn't matter which harness I'm using in my work. And we know that things are changing so incredibly fast right now, but no matter how good the models keep getting, and how all these new tools that keep coming around, I'm constantly reminded that AI on its own is kind of useless. It's kind of overrated, to be honest. What actually matters, what actually makes AI powerful and really change what it means to be a builder, is how we choose to build with it. Exactly what Andy was just saying earlier. So in this talk, I want to sort of just take a minute, take a breather, sort of just step back, and really I want to try to take an honest look at what does it actually mean to be a builder today in 2026. And obviously, it is the AI of it all, and I think we're all thinking about these things. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who's thinking about questions like this. What does my craft actually look like now as a builder, and what happens to the part of building that I've always loved? Is that going away? Is that changing? What does this actually mean for my job or my role, my business? I'm thinking about these questions all the time. I'm sure we all are. And it's kind of scary, but it's kind of exciting at the same time that our industry is at the crest of the wave, if you will. But I'm also thinking a lot about this spectrum. So I want to introduce you to two AI-generated friends that are going to be riding along with us during my talk today. We've got Hank. He's the best engineer in the room, in the organization. He's got opinions. He's got some taste, but he likes to build the way that he's always built. By hand, methodical. And then we have Ada. She's the AI pilled person in the room, and she's genuinely curious and pretty excited about the new stuff that's coming online. She's loving the speed increases that she's seeing every few months with the new stuff, and she's constantly looking at her workflow and reinventing her workflow. And there is this spectrum, and I think I'm sure I'm not the only one who kind of feels like I'm constantly shifting between relating more to Hank on some days and more to Ada on other days, or maybe in this part of my work I'm a little bit behind the curve. In this part I feel like I'm either right on time or maybe at the cutting edge. And I think there's a constant shifting around of that spectrum. I've been a designer and developer. I've bootstrapped businesses for over 20 years or so, and it was about 9 years ago that I fell in love with Ruby and Ruby on Rails, and I've been using it in all of my products and code bases since. Today, in 2026, I'm not writing a single line of code, even though I'm building and shipping more than ever. And I do miss it. I really do. But what's always motivated me is using my builder skills to gain leverage. That's what actually led me to Ruby on Rails in the first place. I saw it as a tool and a way of building that helped me bring my ideas to life, turn into products, get them into the hands of real users and customers. That was a way to gain leverage. And now that's exactly what has me excited about this period of shifting and this transformation of building with AI. It's a whole new way to think about gaining leverage in what we do as builders. And so about a year ago now, I started my current company called Builder Methods. That's where I teach and I run a community of builders who are sort of navigating this transition into building with AI. So I want to start here with thinking high level, big picture. And I've been thinking a lot about this ladder. And as we move up in our work, as we move our craft up this ladder, we are spending less time producing and more time on those high leverage things, high leverage decisions, the judgment, the strategy, the vision for what we're building. And crucially, those upper rungs of this ladder, that's exactly where AI can't go on its own. AI is kind of useless near the top of this ladder, right? So unless we, as the builders, unless we shift our craft up this ladder, we're not actually able to unlock the power and the speed and the advancements that AI is promising. And I think once we start to reframe our approach and start to look at AI as a tool that can help us unlock new capabilities near the top of this ladder, I think that's what at least that's what started to open up my mind to this as a builder. So I want to spend a couple of slides going through the timeline. We're going to go all the way back to ancient history at this point, 2024. And that year and the year, so between 2024, 25, this year, maybe next year, I think that this set of years, I think we're going to end up looking back on this time, this moment, maybe a series of moments as really the time that everything changed in our world as builders. And it's easy to forget. I mean, obviously things are moving so fast. We all see our feeds of all the new drops, all the new models, all the new tools, AI everywhere. It's all incredibly fast. But it's also easy to forget how fast new things can actually start to take hold and become normal. I mean, how many people use Claude Code in any shape, any way, shape, or form in their business? 15 months ago, Claude Code was not a thing. We didn't know what Claude Code was just 15 months ago. That's less than a year and a half ago. That's when it initially launched. And I mean, it's fair to say that now Claude Code is sort of like the industry standard tool. And of course, there are alternatives, but they're all sort of spin-offs that were inspired by Claude Code, the CLI-based way to implement AI in our work. And I mean, that's just one example of how normal and how widespread things can become in such a short, compressed period of time. So in that year of 2024, at the beginning of the year, around January, I think all of us were probably still handwriting every line of code. I know I was. And by the end of 2024, we probably still were, mostly hands-on in assembling our code bases. But I think that was the year that we started to at least become introduced to using AI in our workflow. Obviously, ChatGPT and everything launched, a couple years before that. But really starting to use tools like Cursor and GitHub Copilot, I think, started to become popular around 2024. And I think the way that we were interacting with it for the most part that year was tab completion, right? So we are still handwriting our code, but it's completing our lines for us. It's completing some methods for us, not major builds. So we're starting to tinker around the edges here. We're increasing our speed a little bit, but nothing major. but we're starting to become exposed to it. And so let's check in with our friends Hank and Ada. What were they up to in 2024? Hank, he didn't buy into it. He didn't buy into the hype, and he was stuck still hand coding everything. Of course, not interested in that weird tab completion thing. Finds it more annoying than helpful. I found myself saying that a lot of the time that year. But Ada started to at least toy with it, and then by the end of the year, Ada had switched over from whatever it was, VS Code or whatever, to Cursor. And so she's starting to gain some speed, but I think more importantly, the folks like Ada who did start to at least become exposed and start to incorporate AI in some form in 2024, they started to become more familiar with where the limits were. And there were plenty of limits back then. I think it was around GPT-4 at that time. And, by understanding where the limits were, builders can start to work around them and find creative ways to decide, okay, this is a good place where I can deploy a little bit of AI, and this is where it's just not ready yet. And so understanding those patterns and where those limits are, that set Ada up for the coming months and years when those gaps started to become closed, and then she can start to identify when these newer tools, newer models start to fill in those gaps. All right, so we move into 2025, and I think that's really, I really think we're going to be looking back on that year as a major turning point. I think that's when we saw the sea change, where a bunch of things sort of changed all at once. And there are some specific things that we can point to that year, but I just remember like the vibe actually shifting in the Ruby and the Rails community in particular, but I think in the wider industry as a whole. But I think that there were a few actual things that came online in 2025 that spurred that on. Obviously, Claude Code launched, I think, in like early beta or preview, whatever they called it, around February or March of 2025. By the summer, it started to kind of catch fire, and by the end of the year, people were using it everywhere. I think the real driver of the adoption wave, or the shift in sentiment and adoption, kind of happened when some new models really started to come online. Claude Opus 4.5 and then 4.6 came out in the second half of the year, along with Gemini 3 and GPT-5. Those were really major noticeable shifts in capability, and I think with that brought trust. Like, okay, it's switching from it's making too many mistakes, I can't rely on this, to like, oh wow, that's actually pretty good. So again, we're going to look back on that year as like that was the time when I think many of our teams started to look at this with a more serious eye, and especially late 2025, around the holiday period, when folks had some time off to play with these new tools and take a breather from their normal projects. I think that's when things really started to shift. 2025, from a workflow standpoint, as builders, what I noticed, I especially started noticing this around the middle, like this time last year, was this concept of spec-driven development. And I started to think a lot about this. I started to make some videos about this. And I do think that was the year that approach in general really became the industry norm, the industry standard for how we actually go about building, and moving away from just randomly prompting or vibe coding to taking a much more methodical approach to our craft by emphasizing planning and spending most of our time. And I constantly come back to this graph. I think everything before this time, in general, a way to oversimplify it would be to think that 20% of our time roughly was spent like planning and speccing, and then 80% were actually executing and building the code base. And that's obviously flipped now. Now building with AI means 80% or more of our time is actually the planning and scoping and using PRDs and specs and things. And I think the proof for me that this became an actual industry norm and less about like, oh, this is one style versus another, is that every single major coding harness introduced a feature called plan mode. And they made it a central aspect. I mean, Claude Code has plan mode, Cursor has plan mode, Google Anti-Gravity has plan mode. And they started to push users to use it because that's the way to kind of get the most out of these tools. And by the end of the year, last year, I think that gap between builders like Hank and builders like Ada started to widen. Hank was only dabbling with AI for some of his tasks by this point, but he's increasingly out of step with how the process is actually changing and where the industry is going. Because earlier he wasn't really building that exposure, building that AI muscle, if you will. Ada is starting to see some real gains. So it's tinkering around the edges back in 2024. Now in 2025, things are noticeably changing. She's shipping features. She's able to be more ambitious in the types of projects and products that she's going after. And really as a builder, personally and professionally, a builder like Ada is starting to increase her own trust in what she's able to accomplish during her experience coupled with a frontier model. Of course, 2025, people who are really starting to embrace this new workflow, they're running into a new challenge of the new bottlenecks around QA and like code review and that sort of thing. And I know that's something that a lot of us still continue to deal with today. And I mean, as we move into this year, here we are right in the middle of 2026. I think this is the year where building with AI, this is just the normal way. It's not novel anymore. It's not new and shiny and impressive anymore. Now it's just how we build. And by the beginning of this year, it became pretty clear to me I'm not handwriting any of my code anymore. And only recently, actually, when I was putting these slides together, it started to occur to me that I actually really do kind of miss being deep in the code base. I miss going deep on technical problems, and that, for me, that never-ending journey of learning how to program, how to write Ruby code, how to understand the patterns. That really, like everyone else in this room, that really spoke to a part of my brain, the combination of creativity and technical problems. So I also miss like the creative flow of my day, my work day, being able to shift between hard technical coding problems and more, easy tasks and letting kind of riding those waves of creativity. And I find that now that most of my time is spent in the planning and those high leverage like spec writing and managing multiple agents and work trees and whatnot, I do find that like most of my hours in the day are focused on these high leverage, really harder decision-making tasks, and it can be a little bit more mentally draining. At the same time, I also think that we're living in one of the most exciting times of transformation in terms of what it means to be a builder. And as technical people, we actually stand to gain the most leverage because we have the ability to unlock things that the average AI vibe coder, these things are just not available to that person. We, with our technical experience and where we come from, knowing the patterns that we've seen over the years, we can actually craft better specs. We can get more predictable outcome and output from these AI models. And so we can even go deeper than a typical vibe coder can actually go in terms of how they work with AI in the building process. So we can use our technical chops to build verification loops and agentic systems. And so that's, coming back to the ladder, moving our craft up that ladder, that's where we need to be shifting our time, our effort, our experience is more to these types of tasks, like building out these verification loops and agentic systems. And so, again, this is the year where AI is becoming normalized, and I'm seeing that play out, in kind of three three different patterns this year. One pattern is looking back to 2025. I think we had to build a lot of scaffolding to kind of patch the gaps in AI capability. About a year ago, I created an open source framework called Agent OS, and I released that, and a lot of builders, especially those who were really interested in like spec-driven development, they found that really useful to sort of bridge the gap in what LLMs were capable of. Again, that's just one of many examples out there of like third-party independent frameworks and systems and methodologies that we can kind of layer on or plug in to the agentic workflow. Because the models and the harnesses just weren't quite there yet last year. But this year, I find that less is more is better, and I think the need for harnesses, the need for frameworks and scaffolding, if you will, starts to melt away. And actually, if we remove that stuff, we can actually get better performance, better output if we take a less is more approach to how we work with these models. I mean, the other thing that we're definitely seeing is a lot of volatility right now. So not only things are changing so quickly, but we keep bouncing around between different models, right, and different harnesses. What's better, Claude Code or Codex? Or, different platforms, and pricing is up in the air too. I mean, if you have a Claude Max plan, they keep playing games with their subscription pricing this year. So there's a lot of uncertainty there with the volatility and sort of the horse race between Anthropic and OpenAI and Google and all these things. And so for us as builders, what that means is we need to be more focused on patterns. How our workflow plays out, the tools and the motions that we go through, so that we can focus more on those patterns and less on going all in on any one platform, and be willing to be portable, be able to take our workflow and move it over to another platform, because my prediction is that we will be moving from one platform to another, and back again probably several times over the next month, because this is all, we're in like unsettled territory now with all the platforms and products and models out there. The third pattern that's really becoming normalized this year in 2026 is multitasking with AI. I think people were tinkering with it last year, but now the idea of spinning up multiple work trees and working on multiple projects at the same time, it can be difficult just from the focus part of it, right? To kind of manage multiple projects at the same time. But the reality is now the models are much more capable of taking long-running tasks. We can give them much more ambitious projects to cook on. So that means we can, I often spend a day or more making a big plan or a big PRD, product requirements document, and have Claude cook on that while I start to work on the next one. And I'll spin up another work tree or open up another project. And so now we're starting to see tools like replacements for the more traditional IDE. There's a lot of them now that have like the tabs along the left side where we can manage multiple work trees. These are the adoption of those types of tools to run our models and harnesses is becoming normalized, but it's unsettled. There's no clear leader at this point. 2027, we're in prediction territory here. Productivity gains are happening, but they're also producing new bottlenecks that we and our team have to address. Bottlenecks at the beginning of the workflow, from planning and QA to the QA to the code review. Basically, we as the human in the loop, we are the bottlenecks, and I think that there are two forces that are playing out here. First is this idea of agentic loops. You may have heard people throwing around loops, kind of flowing through your feeds this year a little bit. Earlier this year, Ralph Wiggum loops started to kind of catch fire as like the hot new trend or workflow. But as the year played on, like Claude Code has a feature called loops, and there's more talk of this. Basically, the idea is that models can now run on much longer tasks. They can self-verify their own work. They can self-fix their own work. So our work as engineers, as builders, is more on assembling and standing up these loops and tuning them so that they work and they produce the output that we designed for. That capability is available now, but it's unsettled. If I think back to spec-driven development and how that was, it was a concept in early 2025 and 24, but it didn't become solidified until the harnesses started to release plan mode and made it more of a standardized front and center thing. And I think that's what's going to happen as we head into next year. This idea of loops, it's interesting. There's lots of different ways to go about it right now. It's going to become more standardized and easier to adopt and easier to kind of get on board with next year. So the last idea, the last force that I'm seeing play out, or I think will play out, is one that's talked about less, and that is, we can now build at a fraction of the time and cost than before. And the instinct, of course, is to use that new speed to push the pace and to ship more, to build more and say yes to more projects. But everyone can build fast now. So it's no longer a competitive advantage. So the new edge is judgment, and really that's not new. It's understanding what the right product to build, the right way to reach a product market fit, the right way to understand our users' problems at a deeper level. That's always been the game as builders. That's always been what we're here for, what we're here to do. And so now that's more important than ever. And I think the way to actually stand out from the pack when everyone is building with AI and everyone is moving fast and everyone is shipping fast and saying yes to every single project, I think it's the folks and the teams who are a little bit more selective and step back and say, maybe we don't need to move so fast, but we can still use this power to build something great, And I think, the last quick idea on that is that we can even choose to rebuild entire code bases in a fraction of the time, something that would have been unthinkable because of the time and cost from before. So, I just want to leave you with the idea that, it doesn't really matter which model we use or which tool we use. Again, it comes back to us and how we choose to incorporate it into our workflow. So thanks again for having me. I'm going to be hanging around all day today and tonight, and I'd love to meet folks and hear what you're working on and hear what your challenges are and what your open questions are. So yeah, thanks again, Andy.